Now, the history books tell us the first general presidential debate was not held until 1960. That was the infamous televised verbal duel between John Kennedy and Richard Nixon, which drew more than 66 million American viewers and likely cost Nixon the election because he decided to go without makeup and left a facial sweat trail that made Americans believe he wasn't prepared to become a fearless leader at all. But we can and should go back to 1858 when Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas went head-to-head with no moderator and were gentlemen in the process about talking actual policy and what they would do for the American people instead of what we currently experience, candidates insulting and berating their way into American hearts and minds with what is little more than bad reality TV. The presidential debates of 2016 will be a new low in politics, no matter how you slice it. More often an embarrassing collection, what we've seen so far, of egotists, airheads, bubbleheads, bad joke tellers, and those who allow themselves to get sucked into the political sewer. More often than not, missing the point of what a debate is supposed to be, becoming more sideshow than substance. Now, question for you. Did the presidential debates of this year change your mind about whom you would vote for, and why? Did they really do anything at all to change your mind? Get online at 1-877-Newsmax and be one of the lucky few we will call upon in mere moments. First up, though, our guest is an authority on international law and national security law, former principal legal advisor to the ambassador of Kuwait to the United States, and author of the new book, The Presidential Debates, Issues and Questions for the 2016 Election and Beyond, John Norton Moore. Professor Moore, thanks so much for joining us, because you have started a lot of debates here just with this book itself. Now, tell us about this, though, because this came from 12 Americans who came together at the National Press Club and started to put together these ideas. And why were they so enthused about being a part of this and trying to change the thinking on debates?
Ed, thank you for this opportunity to be with you. Like many Americans, I and many others were quite disappointed at the lack of serious substance in focusing on the major national problems that we saw in the debates in all parties. And as a result, I brought together 12 of the country's top experts to give a series of presentations at the National Press Club on the real issues and what needs to be done about them to move this wonderful country forward. Okay,
now the initiative's called Focusing the Presidential Debates, and the book focuses on three things: economic growth and domestic policy, foreign and defense policy, and criminal justice system reform. I have to be honest with you, those are all wonderful. They're perfect. They're right on the dime, which you would want to hear, though. But you said the phrase serious substance. How do we get the American people to be interested in that substance when it seems they react more to showmanship?
Well, I think one of the sad things about the way the debates were structured is it did not lead to a serious discussion of the policy, but the issues are enormous facing the country. You're certainly right. For example, economic growth affects everything. That's the issue that has people so upset, that's having them just reach out to support anyone they think is not the establishment. And that's jobs, that's dealing with a deficit, that's the money to have a strong military and virtually everything else we want to do. But there are many other issues and opportunities, and we need to be talking about those in the presidential debates.
Do we perhaps then, in order to parse all of the bluster here, Professor, get the television networks out of it? Because as I talked about Lincoln and Douglas, they had no moderator, they went at each other. Of course, you wouldn't expect that now. But take the commercialese out of it right now. Get them to focus on what's going on here, the real issues, and at least try to make that effort to get to the American people. Wouldn't that be a great place to start?
I think that's exactly right, and I think just asking random questions is not something that really gives you a good sense of the candidates. I think you need to take one issue at a time and really pin them down on it and do the entire debate on that one issue, whether it's how you deal with ISIL or how you promote economic growth, how you obtain criminal justice reform, which is so badly needed today in the United States. We have 5% of the population of the world, and today we have 25% of the people behind bars in the world. We need to be reviewing that and many, many other issues, the healthcare system, what we've done with that. There's much, much more that needs to be done.
1-877-Newsmax. We're going to get to your phone calls here in mere moments. Get online and join us here. Professor, there's one thing that comes to mind in here. We talk about Republican debates, Democratic debates, but we have to be honest, we are seeing a political revolution in this country right now. Do we need to break from the two-party debates, get the independents in there, get the libertarians in there, and make it more even? Or is that just sort of what we would hope for, but doesn't make a lot of sense right now?
I'm a strong believer in the two-party system. I think that gives great stability to the country, but I do believe that both parties are going to need to review carefully the process that they have been using for the selection of their presidential candidates. I think simply going to the primary system the way we've done it is something that needs careful review and perhaps a variety of additional checks built into the process. It certainly is pause for concern when you realize that both parties seem to be heading toward selection of a candidate to run for the presidency, each of whom has higher negatives than they have positives.
What does that tell you then? That's interesting because those polls are out there, the unlikability factor is high, and I would imagine that a lot of that unlikability came through the debates themselves. What people said, how they said it, it basically got a lot of people to think maybe differently than they might have before. So when you think about that, is it not fair to say that this has helped to drive a lot of this anger right now? Maybe we shouldn't have 14 candidates on stage. Maybe we need to keep it down to a certain number here. Parse it down a little bit more before we get to what becomes that sideshow.
I think that's correct. I think actually you probably need a more open process initially before you get to the debate phase and somehow integrate it more effectively within the parties. There's a tendency to look at this and say it's just a matter of democracy and who gets the largest number of votes. But this is not the general election. This is the selection by a party, a private party, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, as to their candidate. And I think they need to be reviewing this process in both parties much more carefully. But I also believe that the presidential debates are a time to introduce new and important concepts and changes. The real revolution are the kinds of things we wrote about in the book. The real revolutions are how you move forward to get economic growth back in the United States. There is nothing more important than resuming economic growth. If we can move from 2 to 3% in economic growth, we will in 25 years be about 27% richer as a country. We will in a generation, in 50 years, be about 64% richer as a country. If we go to a 4% growth rate, in a generation we'd be 164% richer as a country. Everything relates to that growth rate, and we need to have serious talk about that. And or just issues of the healthcare system, for example.
Or at least what you're saying in here, I think is exactly right, because unfortunately I'm out of time here, but what you're saying is right. Get down to the serious issues. It's a great time for this book, quite frankly, because you know we're going to see Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders may be involved. Check the book out. Once again, it's called The Presidential Debates, Issues and Questions for the 2016 Elections and Beyond. Educate yourself, America. Be ready for the ballot that's coming up. Professor John Norton Moore, thanks so much for joining us. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ed.
Here we have about a minute 15. Let's go to the phones. 1-877-Newsmax. Pat from Sanford, Maine, thanks for joining us on the Hard Line. Pat?
Hey, Ed.
Go ahead, Pat. It's all yours. You got about 25 seconds. Go.
Okay. Hey, I'm like what Mr. Moore says. There's not enough substance in the debates. It's all about trying to put the other guy down. I think Trump is the man that's going to bring it up, and he's already got everybody running scared.
Did it change your mind? Did the debates do anything to change your mind this year, any of them? Or were you just Donald Trump from the beginning and that's it?
No, I was looking toward other candidates, but I really didn't see anybody that offered anything substantive. I think it's very important that we get to the serious issues. Let's hear some substance in the debates.
My
Don't worry
God,
about
man, you must
the
be
guy standing
crazy.
next to you, his wife, and all that. Let's just get down to what really matters to the American people.
You must be
Security.
crazy, young man. You're talking about substance. Frightening to hear that, but I got to tell you, I love the fact that somebody said it. Pat, thanks so much for joining us. Rich in Florida, you got 30 seconds on the Vietnam arms embargo being lifted by the president. Go.
Yeah, the whole idea behind President Obama lifting this embargo is to mainstream the Stalinist regime of Vietnam into American politics and forge the ties that bind with U.S. military contractors so that our political establishments become inextricably linked. The left has had this love affair with the Stalinist regime of Vietnam now for over 60 years, and this is just a continuation of it.
And we will see how it now filters down because, as you heard earlier in the show, there are some veterans who are not happy at all. Thanks so much for your call. Should every presidential candidate not be held feet to the fire when they flip on critical issues, such as gun control? We'll talk about that and more next on The Hardline.